Okay, so we're coming into the 20th century here, talking about science, technology emerging, and how about the run-up to World War I, setting up all the causes behind it. Look at Albert Einstein for a few minutes, Sigmund Freud, the scramble for Africa, as it was called, Cecil Rhodes, Leopold II, the Russo-Japanese War between Russia and Japan, the Bosnian crisis, the Balkan War, the Triple Alliance, the Triple Entente, the Schlieffen Plan, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, World War I, the U-boats, Lusitania incident, the Battle of Verdun, the Bolshevik Revolution, Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and the Treaty of Versailles. Any questions on that? All right, last time we talked about Pierre and Marie Curie, their contributions to science, particularly about discovery of radioactivity, and plays the important knowledge about the discovery of the divisibility of the atom. In the late 19th, early 20th century, you have a lot of advancements in science, particularly in ideas about the makeup of matter, the fundamental building blocks of everything we see and feel around us, about the nature of energy, about the interactions between matter and energy, atoms, particles making up atoms, and other subatomic particles. Well, you have such figures coming along as Max Planck, came up with something called quantum theory. Question nature, what is energy made up of? Particularly light energy. Now, up to this point, a lot of people thought light was just a steady stream of energy, but instead, Max Planck said, no, it's a little packet of energy, bits of energy being thrown at you. So basically, it's coming at you in waves. It can be described as a stream, but it is more. But Planck came with the idea that it's actually, it can be described as both, but it's more accurately described as a packet of energy. Those waves of radiation coming at you. Then you got Albert Einstein. Like I said, Einstein started getting into really deep questions of matter, energy, space, time, relativity. Like I said, ideas that may not have a lot of practical applications in our daily lives, but are extraordinarily important in our understanding of how the universe actually works. Like I said, Einstein was a brilliant man, but interestingly enough, he didn't learn to talk till he was about 4 years old. He said to me once, remarked that he didn't want to talk until he could say it perfectly. He was always fascinated with all sorts of things, but didn't quite fit in with the kind of stuffy university crowds in Germany, but ended up getting work as a patent clerk in a patent office in Switzerland, where he developed his famed theories on relativity. It's also in this you start seeing Einstein's famed equation equals mc squared. Of course, question, what does that mean? Essentially, it means interchangeability between matter and energy. That basically make one into another and the other into the first. They're essentially interchangeable. Law of conservation of energy means energy can be neither created nor destroyed, but can only be transformed. Idea, but mg mass, the speed of light squared is a constant. Can't even it out, but what it means here, equals mc squared, is not Star Trek transporters, but actually the atomic bomb, nuclear fusion. It's happening in the sun every second, every day for the last 4.5 billion years. Is this right here? Hydrogen fused into helium, a little bit left over, transformed directly into energy. So you see the thermonuclear explosion, matter transformed directly into energy. We also get into these really wild things about space and time. That is, the idea that space was not flat, but it was actually curved by the effects of gravity locally. Start getting such things as gravity waves and so forth. You have very massive objects in the universe, like supermassive stars and black holes. They create this kind of wake of gravity, like we see waves on water. But actually what Albert Einstein does is, through his theory of relativity, is takes Newton's theories on motion and so forth, and basically adapts it for a curved universe. That's when you start getting to wild things like what happens with black holes and stuff. So suppose this represents a gravity well for a black hole. Person starts falling into a black hole. Really weird things start to happen. What happens is gravity is basically so strong that not even light can escape it. Laws of physics are actually twisted around ways we don't even understand yet. What happens, though, is something called time dilation. So the effects of gravity are so intense that is, suppose you're the guy standing here, and your little friend here is falling into this black hole. As he falls in, you'll notice it looks like he's slowing down more and more and more. To the point it looks like he just, right at the edge of the black hole, it just stops. Time dilation. But to him, looking back up at you, looks like you're going faster and faster. It's basically the rate of flow of time is different. They've actually done this experiment on Earth. They put two atomic clocks at the exact same time. One was set on the bottom of the water tower, one at the top. They set them in motion. And after a period of time, noticed that there was a slight difference in the time they were measuring. That is, time was going slower, closer to the source of gravity, closer to the surface. Going just a little bit faster each way.
And that difference is
milliseconds, thousands of a millisecond. Actually, even for astronauts in orbit, they joke about the difference in how much they're going to be paid because of the milliseconds of difference between time flow on the surface versus in the
nanoseconds.
Yeah. But it's noticeable. Actually, it's not time travel, going back into distant points in time. Now you need something like a wormhole for that or something, but differences in the rates of flow of time. And one other impact of relativity was they proved this through Einstein's theories through observing an eclipse. That is, there's going to be stars be passing right by the sun at a particular time. Looks like it's going to be about here in the sky. The sun's here. But because of relativity, star was going to actually be in a slightly different position. Process they call gravitational lensing. Basically, the force of gravity is so strong close to the sun is that it actually bends light, makes it actually kind of round a corner instead of going in a straight line. And through these careful observations of the star, they found out that, yeah, that was actually happening. It's about 1914 we were able to prove this, but that sounds real. Theory is closer to getting the century, but essentially, light was curving because of the intense effects of gravity. It does even more so with a black hole.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Science fiction. That's
What I thought, what I
not
would think, I would think if it was close to the sun, if anything that produces heat, it emits or it pushes the heat from it. So I don't
like
know
a
if that's
mirage effect.
right. So I don't know if it's what they meant by bending, but to me that makes sense. If something is passing by and something is giving out immense heat like that, it pushes out and it will make things move away if you put it in front of it.
Yeah, the mirage effect. It's basically air currents,
Right.
basically distorting how you see something. It's not actually, like I say, it's not actually bending light any at all. It's just an optical illusion.
Right. Well, not meaning optical illusion, but meaning that if I'm standing in front of something, even a piece of lint or a piece of paper in front of a heat source like that, it gives off and it makes it move just by the sheer, from the heat itself.
Like I say, your effect of your body heat next to something, it can have an effect on air currents and cause things to expand and contract slightly. But
But the sun's gravity is strong enough to have all these planets in the solar system, so if the moon passes close by enough to it, it'll, like even Earth, like I've read about how astronauts can use Earth's gravitational pull to completely change their direction just from the gravity of Earth.
Right.
Actually, in fact, the sun's gravity is about 25 times what it is on Earth. So you weigh about 100-pound person weigh about 2,500 pounds on the sun.
If we get there.
Yeah, assuming you could on a surface about 5,000 degrees.
Right.
Would you want to land on top of a nuclear explosion? Probably not. But actually, that's nothing compared to a black hole or something like that. You have some of these stars that are so compressed by gravity that they call a state they call neutron degeneracy, basically, where electron degeneracy with a white dwarf star, basically, everything's squeezed in so tightly there's no space between the atoms. All electrons are all right on top of each other. But neutron degeneracy, the neutron stars they call it, caused by a supernova, basically, huge star explodes. Most powerful force in the universe. The neutron stars basically were these electron shells, these electron orbits have collapsed because of the pressure between of everything squeezing in on top of it, and basically it's wall-to-wall neutrons. Proton is a electron crashes onto a proton, canceling out the charges, making a neutral particle, neutrons. Oh yeah. Actually, I majored in astronomy for a while. But neutron star, that's that material that basically, you hold a teaspoon of it, it weighs about 20 tons. A neutron star, basically, imagine a star the size of the sun compressed into an area the size of, say, Union County, at 20 or 30 miles across. Imagine the force of nature it takes to create that. So when a star does explode into a supernova, it is the brightest star in that galaxy. But And it's also the force that causes a star to collapse into a black hole, what's left of it.
But now, what is Albert Einstein
Einstein,
relation with this history class as far as what we're going to learn, what he made a difference in this, what we're talking about, is
because of Einstein, you have the practical effects of advances in science,
Right.
imagination. Like I said, 20th century becomes a time which basically the higher levels of science are dominated by men like Einstein.
yes, sir.
Transforms our understanding of the universe. Because of Einstein, you have such things as microwave ovens and the atomic bomb. And the practical effect of this, gravity wells, gravitational lensing, or for astronomy, something, but it helps us understand how our Earth and solar system were formed billions of years ago. Like I say, 500 years from now, it'd be fundamental to ideas of space exploration. Like I say, Einstein also said such things as basically there's a universal speed limit, the speed of light. Nothing can go past the speed of light because as objects of mass get closer and closer to the speed of light, they actually get heavier and heavier. Again, part of what we call Lorentz contraction. Like say, Star Trek talk about warp drive, that's basically what they're talking about, or that old movie Event Horizon about folding space. That's basically how you get around that. The problem is they haven't figured out how to do it yet. And basically, get around that, you can go theoretically get from here to the nearest star 4.3 light years away, maybe a day. It would be cool. But it's something that probably won't happen for a couple of centuries yet. So our descendants be kind of stunned how little we understand about that in the 21st century. In the 24th, 25th century, it will be just as every day is us walking into a room or turning on our computers. It's just one big step in progress. Is that where they... And of course, like I said, it's that's the Lorentz equation.
He's forward like we're going to be dead.
No, that's not a calculus course. Basically, that's describing how objects they approach the speed of light, how flow of time is distorted. But very basically, though, is as people with a college education, people learning about the world, the universe, how things work, is you do have to know these things. And not just for being on Jeopardy one day, but because you need to understand the fundamental premises of how this universe works. Another thing is important for imagination. You need to think about these great concepts. You take this leap beyond logic sometimes. Understand just how exactly is this world working and what could become because of what we know about it.
Yeah, but we're still, we haven't even figured out how to clear out the line field, and we're in space, and we're trying to, we try to not even how to dispose of tires and stuff now. And so we're worrying about a star, and we're trying to eat down here and survive. I'm good with that, but I'm talking about everyday life, stuff that you know, that's affecting my children, and, you know, and your children or whoever it's going to be.
Actually, all sorts of things. Say, what if an asteroid slams into us one day? That could be very unpleasant. But
It's a done deal.
say guys like Einstein figure, okay, how's that not going to happen? How do we keep something like that from happening?
We're,
The idea of life in other parts of the
this
universe.
is
See,
us here, and
Yeah,
we're
we're-
talking something that if it wants to hit the earth, is going to hit the earth. There's not a lot you're going to be able to do about that. We're not talking Bruce Willis and
Actually, you
Armageddon
can't. That kind of
and all
technology.
that, where they go up and put it in there and split a meteor and all of that. Yeah, that's theory, and yeah,
Actually, the technology to do that exists.
but okay.
Actually, the dinosaurs went extinct because an asteroid struck the Earth. Because it's all highly theoretical things we're talking about here, but of course, it goes back to the very first day of the first class is,
Yeah.
how does man survive in a hostile world?
Okay.
And so when we can't adapt to the world, of our imagination, we make the world adapt to us.
Okay.
If it means putting a little satellite or whatever into orbit or launching a nuclear missile at an asteroid, or just getting something just kind of push it out of the asteroid out of the way, that's what saves humanity.
Now we have a space full of space junk of stuff that's not working now. Now we have litter up there because of stuff that we've lost and all of that. I'm good with all of this. You know, really I am. I'm all about advancing and moving forward. I'm good with that. But I'm talking about just solving the everyday common things here. You know, and we're all the way out there. We haven't even, like I say, even resolved the issue of getting rid of darn tires in the landfill. You know, just something as simple as that.
That's it.
Maybe we're working on a backup plan.
So you got to have a
Maybe
backup
we're working
plan.
on a backup plan.
The thing about tires and landfills, yeah, we can solve that problem, but the question is, do we want to?
Okay.
Think about all the air pollution we put out with factories, cars, and everything. We can solve that problem immediately. The
Right.
question is, do we want to? There's enough food in the world to feed everybody on Earth,
Understood.
but all the problems getting it to people, do we want to solve those problems?
So the whole concept is that if we don't change our thinking, it doesn't matter about all of the advancements, because that's what it all boils down to, is our thinking process with everything that we do.
We
You know,
have
why
to
do you
change
do
the
what
way
you
we
do?
think.
Right.
Like say debris in space from space launches and satellites that have gone out. That's a problem, but it's one that can be solved.
Okay.
Like say, like they all say, you say there's no such thing as a free lunch. You solve one problem, you do create another. Okay, you got electric lights. Okay, you don't have to worry about your house burning down because of candles, but now you've got an electric bill. But
Or faulty wires where you're going to have electrical fire.
Exactly.
So the pros and cons come with all. I'm not trying to take away from the class or anything, because I know
it's a
we can
question
move
that
forward.
needs to be asked.
But
It's
I just look at things a little bit different also. All right.
Actually, the very point is sometimes we need to change the way we think.
That's what it is.
The way things have been done for 50, 100 years, you got to ask ourselves, is that necessarily the best way?
That's great.
Yeah.
I saw this documentary that was saying that for $50,000 you can get your brain freeze, like frozen. Not exactly frozen, it's something to do with
Cryogenic stage, yeah.
But that, like later in the future they can take your brain out and put it in a new body. Is that true?
Are people trying to get you to spend $50,000 to do that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing
Does that mean somebody could do that in the future? Basically a full body transplant? It's theoretically possible. But the question is, you're making a bet on somebody in the future not only having preserved your brain, saved it, kept a nice little frozen jar, a little Yeti cooler in somewhere. But you're willing to bet that they have a body waiting for you, they can cure whatever killed you, and they actually would think it would be ethical to do so. It's a theoretically, yes. Could in 100 years, could the things that are that kill us today be cured? Absolutely, very highly possible. But the question is,
The answer is no, it's a scam.
yeah, pretty much. Trying to find a way to put it diligently. But right now, yeah, it's pretty much a scam. That okay, they're going to freeze you on death, and they're going to unfreeze you, jumpstart you with the, defibrillator pads, and everything's going to be fine. You're going to go off. You're going to resume your life. You're going to go back to your old job, back to your old house, and everything goes on the way it was. No, that's not going to happen. Like I said, it's not going to happen. Because a lot of the things, a lot of these cryogenic places, they don't have the storage. They say after a few years, sometimes they dump bodies.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I was like, there's a lot of people that could afford to do that. So there's like no way now that we can prepare ourselves to be around.
I'd say the best thing you can do is right now is eat right, exercise, minimize stress. I'd say don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. And if you want to make a world worth living for, make it a world worth living for. Get involved. Do something good for other people. Invent something. Say go to medical school. Say cure a disease or something. Write a great novel or something. But of course, you think Albert Einstein's wild. Wait till I get to Erwin Schrödinger.
The cat.
Yeah, the cat guy.
Psychology.
No, actually, it is what's called quantum mechanics.
Right.
And Schrödinger himself said, if you say you understand quantum mechanics, you really don't. It's all about probability at the subatomic level. But probably the most famous description of it was the Schrödinger's cat experiment. Basically, kind of a morbid way of describing it, actually. But basically, you set up something where you have a cat in a box. Set up something where the probability could the cat die. Set it off, and that moment before you open it, is the cat alive or dead? Or you may got a cord or something on him. Promise I'll give it right back.
He said, give it back, cat. Everybody was looking like, go give it to him first.
Essentially, it's all probability, statistics, higher levels of it. Yeah. Oh,
Good job.
heads or tails? 50-50 chance if it's going to be heads or tails. Basic probability question. Okay, we'll call it
Tails.
heads.
Yeah.
Now, according to quantum mechanics, at this moment, it's both. Because you don't know it. Full probability. So there's a world somewhere, universe somewhere where this is heads, somewhere where this is tails. Right now we're in the one where this is tails. Schrödinger's cat.
Quick snippet of trivia.
Yeah.
On coin flips, it's not the perfect way to do probability because there's a small chance that there's a small percentage increase on whatever side you have facing upward on your thumb. Whenever you flip it, that side has a small chance to be.
Slight variation. You got air, whether I can catch it or not.
But it's the best way on the fly. It's the best way to do probability.
It's a good example of it. But get into science fiction aspects of it. I'm going to call it the many worlds hypothesis. Basically, it's all possibilities that can occur do occur in different states of quantum realities. Except basically the idea of alternate universes created by quantum mechanics. Is there any practical use for that? No, it's just something neat to think about. This is something physicists like to play with. But of course, you're studying subatomic particles. Except their velocity, their properties, spin, charge. Think of this guy, Werner Heisenberg. Came at something in physics called the uncertainty principle. Remember that show, Breaking Bad? It said the high school chemistry teacher who can't pay his medical bills, so starts manufacturing, selling meth, start calling himself Heisenberg. So he gets it. Because in the show, he was the uncertainty principle. But basically, the uncertainty principle is you cannot know exactly the exact position and the exact velocity at the same time of a subatomic particle. You know, the more you know one, the less you know of the other. There's only a certain optimal point you know both. But of course, it's all confusing. That's why we go back to Sigmund Freud. Freud essentially is considered to be the father of psychoanalysis. So you take Dr. Claypool's class on psychology, he'll go all into Freud for you. Now, a lot of his ideas have been modified, thrown out as inaccurate or just cut out wrong, but basically, he got the ball rolling on it. The study of the human mind, what you're thinking about. Basically, how to fix serious emotional problems. That's the idea of laying on the couch and just talking. That's basically was Freud's idea. The idea was how do you, was basically that in psychology, basically, you're trying to help people solve problems. And they do that basically by talking it out. In many cases, there's an origin for most emotional problems. And they can figure out a way around it, they can unravel them. But he had several interesting theories on human nature. Is that human behavior is strongly determined by your unconscious. There's a part of your mind that is not actively thinking or actively functioning or not actively aware of, but the part of your mind that is basically driving your desires and your behavior. It's basically said there are three parts of the human mind. He described it as the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the center of your unconscious desires. Ego is your reason, your consciousness. Basically, right now, listening to this, you're using your conscious mind, you're using your ego. Superego basically is your conscience. It's your morality, defined by certain social pressures and ideals. They're called socialization. 1900, Freud wrote a book called The Interpretation of Dreams. Basically, he decided that the dreams you have when you sleep at night, they aren't just random, disconnected, disjointed images. They mean something a lot of times. And if you can think about the imagery, think about what's going on, it's basically, it is actually your subconscious mind talking to your conscious mind. Basically, you're trying to solve a problem. So basically, your subconscious trying to solve a problem, reasoning it out.
But some dreams are so crazy. They just seem like parts of things that your mind's just kind of gotten from all over and just kind of put together. Like.
Yeah. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's too hard to figure out. Sometimes we just don't remember it in the morning, don't remember enough of it. Sometimes it's just too weird. Like I said, your subconscious is not just thinking of two different things at once. example, suppose you have a dream that you're running. Usually that means you feel like you're under stress. You're trying to run away from a problem. Say different things symbolize different things in your dreams.
Yeah.
Example, suppose you're driving a car. You're riding in a car. Freudian psychoanalysis says whoever's driving that car is who you feel like is in control of your life. If you're driving, you feel like you're in charge. You feel like parents, significant other, feel like they're more in charge. If nobody's driving, it means they'll let you feel like you're out of control. Or maybe part of the classic dream where you come in wandering to class, it's 5 minutes left in the final exam. That's a stress dream. It means you feel like you're under stress somewhere. And essentially, it's just different ways of figuring out problems. Like I said, there have been professional athletes trying to figure out problems with their performance on the field and basically dreaming about different things and help them solve problems, like golfers with golf swings and pitchers with pitching, things like that. Just figuring out, okay, if I do this instead of that, one of these cases turned out it worked.
There's a method of figuring out problems that have to do with that. It's whenever you sit on a chair and you get to have a medicine ball that's the size of your hand. That's pretty heavy. It makes a sound whenever you drop it. You start thinking about a problem, and whenever you start dozing off, you start figuring, how you say that dreams help you solve problems.
Yeah.
Sometimes you start thinking about that problem, and once you start dozing off, you drop the ball, and then you wake up, and you're able to remember what you were thinking about whenever you're dreaming.
Yeah.
That's one way to solve the problem.
Exactly.
You said
Freud really used dreams and hypnosis to help unlock the unconscious mind. Freud also came up with the idea of what they call the pleasure principle, that is, humans tend to be drawn towards things that give them pleasure and driven away from things that give them discomfort or pain. That is, we avoid things that are stressful, our subconscious nature. But he also had some very bizarre ideas about people with the relations to their mothers and fathers and development of their sexual identities, but a lot of which have been completely discarded. But it came up with some very important ideas, particularly about ideas about, about certain emotional issues, certain traumas. That is, a lot of the way people act in the world is because people with emotional problems is because usually it's because they're responding to some trauma in their past, usually in their formative years, usually in their childhood. Yeah. Sometimes depression, sometimes it could be exact opposite, very impulsive behavior. Or, example, suppose someone's paranoid. Means basically they have a very difficult time trusting anyone. Part of that psychosis is they're basically trying to read someone's mind, always trying to read something into someone else's actions and words. And it's usually because as children, they were severely emotionally abused. Basically, they just constantly, usually verbally abused. Just have their completely worn down to the point they just really can't trust anybody. And what had been a survival mechanism, basically, what they thought was became a habit, when it became a psychosis, they just couldn't turn off.
I think a certain level of paranoia is probably
I'd say there's a difference between skepticism and paranoia. Like I said, paranoia is basically, it's a compulsion. Basically, you can't control it. You distrust everybody. You can't trust anybody or anything. Like so these people who think that the government is using satellites to read your mind right now. Like that's an extreme example. But skepticism, asking questions, trying to figure out, okay, is this guy really on the level? For example, the $50,000 cryogenics thing. That's skepticism. That's a healthy question to ask.
It was fun to try to believe for a minute.
But I say it's but ask healthy questions about these things. That's a good thing. But completely distrusting everybody and everything just for the sake of doing so is a problem. For example, it's a problem sometimes we see today is well, people aren't going to trust anything they don't already believe. Say somebody says something about evolution or global warming. Well, I don't believe that, so we're just not going to believe it. It makes no sense. It's a conspiracy.
And it doesn't even matter if you prove it right, they acknowledge that you've proven it right, because then they're like, well, I just don't believe it.
Yeah, you're just part of the conspiracy, or they just refuse to. Because the problem with people who are paranoid is they're very difficult to treat by psychoanalysts, because it's very hard to get them to open up and really say what's on their mind.
Yeah, I have an uncle who's a paranoid schizophrenic. If you tell him he wasn't really smoking pot with Willie Nelson yesterday, he would get really upset.
Yeah.
Like, he really believes, like, he thinks he's been abducted by aliens for real. When I was a kid, I used to believe him. And I used to think Star Wars was real, because
Or say, suppose schizophrenia or something. And you got those diseases that are caused biologically, because something didn't form right, some kind of chemical imbalance, a depression sometimes. It's often just a chemical imbalance, not necessarily caused by anything. Just an accident.
I don't know, my family...
Sometimes caused by traumas. It is.
Yeah, they always say that, like, he used PCD or something a long time ago, and that he almost died from it ever since anything like that. But before that, he was like a genius.
Yeah. Like I say, drugs do cause severe brain damage like that. Like I say, schizophrenia is actually one of several different diseases. Like I say, it's not just the split personality disorder. Like I said, some psychologists aren't sure that even exists, or you have multiple personalities. It's very controversial even. But one common form of schizophrenia is people who hear voices, or hear noises, or hallucinations. Like I said, and it's to the point they just can't ignore it. Sometimes they're very disturbing.
And it's called megalomania when they're very convinced that it's God's voice.
Yeah. Like I say, some people think that Joan of Arc was schizophrenic because she always heard this music, and then the voice of the angel started telling her to do things. Like I said, that sounds a lot like the symptoms of schizophrenia. But the problem, though, with people who are mentally ill, though, is they get to the point where they can't make decisions in their own best interest. They cannot... so they can't make decisions in their own best interest. Sometimes they get to the point they just can't discern between what's real and what isn't. The problem with paranoid schizophrenics is they just don't know what's real and what isn't. Sometimes they get to the point they just really don't care. Like I said, medications can treat that, but getting the dosage and the balance just right is a very difficult thing to do.
Even a person willing to see a doctor is paid too, especially when you know they could kill you about
So let's scramble. I want to. We have a tester there. We haven't gotten
I'm about to say that question.
Basically, we'll get to that in just a second. Let's go to Russia first. Russia, at the turn of the century, it's fallen behind the rest of Europe again. So the communists are on the rise in Russia, disgusted with deep poverty and unresponsive government. But Russia is starting to modernize a little bit, but not very much. But they're trying to expand their interests in Asia at this point. So go here to page 765. But Japan at the same time is also trying to expand its interest in Asia. The point they're looking at here is northeastern China. So in 1904, Russia and Japan, seeing each other as rivals, it's coming down to war. Basically, Russia is in pursuit of a warm water port as one is free of ice all year round. The best, closest place they can get to that is off the coast of China. But that's territory Japan's eyeing. So what ends up happening is, in 1904, Japan stages a sneak attack on the Russian port at Port Arthur. So Japan launching a sneak attack. That's going to being out of the running theme here.
Yeah.
It's a long, drawn-out war. People expect that Russia is going to win because, well, they're Europeans. They're going to beat an Asian country. Japan is considered to be very backwards, but Japan was modernizing very rapidly, industrializing very rapidly. And Japan ends up surprising the world when they beat Russia. That's the Russo-Japanese War. It's ended by negotiations conducted by President Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt became the first American president to win the Nobel Peace Prize. But basically, this really ends up upsetting the apple cart because Russia no longer was the great power it thought it was. Now Japan is this rising power in Asia. Meanwhile, Russia is falling apart. 1905, you have this strike and the massacre of peasants in Moscow, basically workers striking and marching in Moscow, so the army just basically comes out and starts shooting those people. A legislature called the Duma is created in 1907, but it has very little power. So essentially, everyone's trying to move into China to establish these spheres of influence, basically these exclusive trading zones just between China and that particular country. France, Britain, Germany, Japan, Russia. China's fallen apart, so we're divided into warring camps, and basically the European powers are ready to basically colonize China. So the China at the beginning of the 20th century, it's a basket case country. It's synonymous with backwards, impoverished, like I say, desperately poor. So Europe's basically coming in just to carve up what's left of it. But it goes back to what we started about at the beginning of the semester about colonization. Colonies are about money and power. Nations of Europe are on the upswing. They want that money and that power. But by 1900, there aren't a lot of areas left that are uncolonized, except for, page 764, Africa. Before 1880, Europe controlled very little of Africa. Most of Europe's concerns were basically areas of the Pacific and the Americas, but now they're turning back to Africa, realizing there's a wealth of natural resources available. Along comes Cecil Rhodes. He dominated British Africa policy, helped set up a lot of diamond and gold mining companies across Africa, making a ton of money. The colony of Rhodesia was named after him. That is the present-day nation of Zimbabwe and Zambia. See there on page 764. Now the Dutch had established a few small colonies in South Africa, but Britain basically is ready to move in. So between 1899 and 1902, you have something called the Boer War. So British colonists and the British Army basically tried to overthrow the Dutch government there. And the Dutch colonists there, called the Boers, eventually are defeated by the British. The British have taken control of the region, but they're having also a lot of problems with the native tribes in the area, particularly the Zulus. So they're creating problems for some time. That's another aspect of the Boer Wars, is not only the British fighting the Dutch colonists, but also the Zulus as well. So by 1907, Britain has consolidated its control of the region, creating what's called the Union of South Africa. Next, Britain just starts expanding its control from there. In 1880, Portuguese Angola here in the southwest, and French Algeria in the north, those are about the only major colonies really have in the region. So you have the Ottoman Empire who controlled most of the North African coast, but it's basically falling back rapidly. France took control of Algeria in 1830. Civilian government set up in 1879, but basically, because it's so close to France, so many colonists moving into the area, that France basically considered basically a part of France, like the rest of the mainland. Like we consider Alaska to be a state of the United States. France considered Algeria to be that much part of France, so just a colony. But by 1900, they moved to seize control of Tunisia and West Africa. Spain moves in, forming a protectorate over Morocco, the remainder going to Spain. 1869, the Suez Canal, connecting the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, connected through Egypt. It's opened up by France, but to protect its land routes to India, it's a trade route with India, extremely important colony for Britain. Britain goes in and takes over Egypt, including the Suez Canal. So Egypt becomes a protectorate for Britain by 1882. It's independent by 1922. Britain also moves further south, seizing Sudan. So, get to the eve of World War I, 1914, 1064 is here basically what you have set up here with this control of Africa. Most of Western Africa, the equatorial areas, is controlled by France. A little strip of Eastern Africa controlled mostly by Britain. Then you got these other countries basically scrambling for everything else. Just in a very short time, everybody comes in and takes their little piece of it. Italy's wanting to become a great power again, so they move in what they can, which is basically Libya, and portions of Eritrea and Somalia. But by 1914, there are only two independent countries left in Africa. Ethiopia, which had been independent since antiquity, and Liberia, which had been founded by the descendants of American slaves. It stayed independent basically because America basically considered it to be a protectorate. Basically telling the nations of Europe, said, hands off. But interestingly enough, the problem for the descendants of those slaves who left the United States for Liberia is, for one thing, most of their ancestors didn't come from Liberia. And those who did were generations removed from Liberia, with real understanding of different cultures and dynamics at work. And even to this day, we have this tension between the descendants of the colonists and descendants of the original natives. Liberia's been in a series of horrific civil wars for a good part of the 19th and 20th century. Now, the heart of Africa here, the Congo, the Belgian Congo, is opened up by this man, King Leopold II. Now, Congo, then refers to the area in and around the Congo River, the deepest Africa. Leopold pushed for a Central African colony, and so about 1876, the Belgian Congo is theirs, but it's the densest jungles, most remote areas of Africa, very difficult to access. But Belgium ends up making a ton of money off diamond mining in that area. But of course, also you got Germany stepping in here. Germany's a brand new country. It's kind of light green countries here. Angola, German East Africa, German Southwest Africa. Well, Germany wants its colonies because colonies by the 19th century are a status Germany considers itself to be a great power, so they want these colonies to show their power and have these raw materials to make a fortune off of. But by the time they got around to it, basically Britain and France had dominated most of Africa. So it's basically these tiny little leftovers, and they're kind of fighting for the scraps. So it's also causing a serious problem. Australia had been colonized in New Zealand, just off to the right here, so it's east. Been colonized by England. By 1901, Australia reached its own dominion status, like it had Britain had with Canada. 1907, New Zealand had its dominion status. So by 1900, Britain controls 1/4 of the globe. One every 4 people on Earth is a British subject to Queen Victoria. The serious problem over Britain's and its colonies in Africa, Asia, the Pacific, is that 90% of the people living under British control are illiterate. Most people are in deep poverty. So you have a few interests in Britain are making a ton of money off this. The great bulk of them are not. That's leading to a lot of tensions between the colonists and Britain itself. Meantime, you also have the United States expanding its Pacific, annexation of Hawaii, Guam, and several other islands in the Pacific. Spanish-American Wars between Spain and the United States. The United States seizes control of the Philippines in 1898. Spain's empire in the Mediterranean, in the Caribbean, the Pacific disintegrates. So you've got all these serious problems here. Otto von Bismarck knew that a united Germany had set the balance of power established by the Congress in Vienna. He tried to maintain the balance, but to Germany's advantage. Germany wants colonies. It wanted to expand and be more aggressive in its colonization efforts, particularly under Wilhelm II. Germany had humiliated France in the Franco-Prussian War. France wants revenge. And this delicate system of balance of power that existed in 1815, it's not there anymore. Essentially, the nations of Europe are trying to work from the assumption of just enough threats and enough military power where no one's going to dare try to go to war with each other. But the peace in Europe is very fragile now. But you have men like Wilhelm II and others who see a lot of these little weak colonies, these areas that can be seized by them so easily. They're willing to risk destroying that peace in order to grab it. More power, more influence, more wealth. Like I said, great advances in chemistry and physics in the late 19th, early 20th century. It's being converted into weapons. Countries are modernizing their weaponry very rapidly. Their armies are growing rapidly. Trying to seize these colonies around the world. It's a very delicate alliance system. So all this is moving into the formation of World War I. Get a handout on that here real quick. And all this is basically creating a powder keg that's going to explode by 1940. So, and all of this coming down to what they call the sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire. Remember, Ottoman Turks spent most of their 19th century contracting in southeastern Europe. Like little countries popping up, all wanting to settle old scores. So, and having this situation here. In 1878, Bosnia-Herzegovina had been made a protectorate of Austria. It was formally annexed in 1908. Serbia, just to the south, had been hoping to annex Bosnia itself and create a port for itself on the Adriatic Sea. Well, Serbia is threatening to go to war with Austria over Bosnia. Serbia is this tiny little country. Austria feels like it can knock it off without any problem. And Russia steps into this point, 1908, supporting Serbia and opposing Austria's annexation of Bosnia. At this point, the Kaiser of Germany, Wilhelm II, intervenes and tells Russia, you go to war with Austria, you're going to war with Germany too. Russia, just having lost the Russo-Japanese War, still stinging from the losses and its own internal problems, backs down. The very possibility that you could have a war between Austria and Russia in Germany, 1908, 1909, fades because of Russian weakness. But you have two major wars here between 1911 and 1913, Balkan Wars. All these different little countries fighting each other, trying to gain more territory. Let's see, Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Montenegro, all fighting each other. And so you have this complicated alliance system now built because of this. The delicate peace has been arranged, but it could explode at any minute. Now, Wilhelm II had feared an anti-German alliance of Russia, France, and possibly Austria, so they created a defensive alliance of Austria-Hungary in 1879. Italy joined as the Triple Alliance in 1882. But see, the thing is, Bismarck had maintained a separate peace treaty with Russia to prevent the possibility of Russia and France allying each other, as it had way back during the 7 Years' War. See, Bismarck doesn't want a two-front war, having fought Russia on one side and France on the other. So it has a treaty with Russia to make sure they wouldn't ever have to worry about Russia. But Wilhelm II decides no. He's going to get rid of that treaty. Because it threatens the alliance of Austria. So he cancels that treaty, and guess what happens? Russia allies with France. And in 1907, they had Great Britain. So you got Britain, France, and Russia all allied against Germany. So yeah, the two-front war is about to happen now. But the German High Command, led by General Alfred von Schlieffen, created an idea for that, called the Schlieffen Plan. Basically, mobilize Germany's army very quickly, knock out France very quickly by bypassing a direct confrontation with the French army and going through Belgium, which is neutral, taking Paris, surrounding the French army, forcing it to surrender within 6 weeks. Basically, you're creating the Franco-Prussian War. Except this time go through Belgium instead. And then, because Russia has a huge army, it takes longer to mobilize. It takes longer to get the people in place. Then turn around and slug it out in the long war with Russia. That's the Schlieffen Plan. So, Germany's feeling pretty good about itself in 1914. They can take on any possibility, but France has been strengthening its military. Germany realizes if they want to war with France, knock them out once and for all, they better do it fast. and by 1914 looking for any excuse to do so. They find that the most bizarre places of all, assassination Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay.